What's up guys, TopTierYugioh here, and today I just want to share with you my Knightmare Spiral deck that I played at ARG Hartford this weekend. I got 30th place, so not amazing but not bad either, but I think this will be useful for anybody wanting to play the deck, just to give you some ideas, but also to help you know what's in that deck, so if you're playing against it, you know what to expect. So let's go ahead and get into it. So to start things off, we have 3 super agents and 3 tough, very standard. Next we have 1 quick fix, 1 drone, 1 master plan, 1 sleeper, and 1 last resort. These are all pretty standard for the most part, but I do want to talk a bit about master plan because it did get a whole lot better with Flames of Destruction. Because now that we have access to Knightmare Unicorn, we can shuffle resort back into the deck so that we can resolve master plan's second effect to search it. And that's one of the major differences that the Knightmares offer to Spirals, because before it was like, if you drew your resort which you wanted to do for consistency, you couldn't resolve master plan, which made it problematic. But now we don't have that issue anymore. And then another good thing about master plan is that the rescues that you search, you can discard from the Knightmares as well to give you a lot of free value. And so master plan got a whole lot better with Flames of Destruction. I mean, it was already good, it was already one of the best cards in the archetype, but it was sort of difficult to play beforehand, like before Flames of Destruction, but now it becomes a whole lot better. So I'm really happy with the Spiral monster lineup right now. One thing that I was thinking about cutting though was Last Resort, because Last Resort is one of the only bricks that you play, but it's necessary to protect your monsters. So like Sleeper plus Last Resort is still just such a very strong combination, and there are also games where you're just equipping any of your monsters like a tough with Last Resort to keep it alive, just so you have follow-up plays for the next turn. And so Last Resort comes up a lot, however it's very bricky, and so that's something that you can definitely consider cutting. And some people have also talked, or I've heard people talk about cutting Sleeper, which I can also sort of see because it can somewhat be a brick and you don't necessarily need it to win in a lot of cases. However, if you're trying to set up defensive boards, Sleeper is one of the best cards that you can have. And then even when it comes to breaking boards, having the card that can pop 2 other cards on the field is still really strong. And sometimes you even want to destroy itself to get the other effect, to destroy all your cards and special summon a super agent. That way super agent can trigger and destroy another card, so it can get rid of 3 cards sometimes by itself. And so that can be a really useful effect too. And so while I can understand cutting them because they hurt your consistency a little bit, I do think that they're strong enough to warrant play. And so that's just something to think about. Next I played 10 hand traps, and the reason I played so many is because I planned to go second in most of my games, because I felt that going second allowed you to utilize your cards such as Tough and Super Agent a lot more than you could going first. Now another problem with going first is that it forces you to be the control for a little while because you can't win on your first turn. So being the control turn 1 means you have to set up a lot of defense. Now the problem with that is if you get hand trapped, the deck isn't very good at that. So like your plays are usually funneled through either Master Plan or Helix. If that gets ashed or Chariot or something, you cannot play. But if they have that hand trap, which they will still have if you're going second because it's one of the first 5 cards, you can play through it and still get value out of your other cards. So you can still like Tough Agent attack. Versus if you're going first, you would have to like Tough Agent Helix get ashed and then pass and then get killed. But going second doesn't have as many disadvantages, I don't think. And so many times that second card will fix your hand too. And so I really preferred going second because it just fixed a lot of the deck's problems, I felt that. And another thing was that like you can do all those wombo combos and stuff to build the whole Trigate board and everything, and I do it sometimes too, but you don't necessarily have to put 8,000 on board, clear their board, and kill them. So you don't have to do all of that, and going second allows you to sort of have that option. And so I did like this a lot. And so I went with this lineup because I felt that 3 Ash was necessary. Ash is, I think, the most versatile hand trap right now. It's good against every single deck, and you just have to play 3, I think. And so the way I sort of looked at the format, and I'm not saying this is correct or not, but I considered maybe 3 to 4 actual threats to me. And those were Spiral Mirror Match, Goki, Altergeist, and then Trickstar. And so Trickstar is definitely the bottom of the list though, because I don't think that deck's anywhere near as good as the other 3. But I thought against any of those decks, Ghost Ash, or not Ghost Ash, but Ash Blossom is really useful. And so against Spirals, like I said before, you can negate Master Plan, you can negate Helix. Against Gokis, you can negate Isolde, and that usually hurts them a lot. Against Altergeist, hitting Spoofing. Sometimes hitting a Multi-Faker can be really strong as well, depending on if they have Protocol or how the game state looks. But generally hitting Spoofing is really strong because that's a cost. Also hitting Duality because that's just a power play in any deck that plays Duality. And then against Trickstars, you can hit Reincarnation to keep you from getting like reincarnated to death. And so I really like Ash Blossom a lot. Ghost Reaper was very good theoretically if the format was only those 4 decks. However, that was a mistake. And so I played 7 different decks, and most of those were not what I expected, and so Cherries was not very strong in those. However, again, if I correctly identified what the format would have been, I think Cherries is a very strong choice. It's really good against Goki, it's really good against Spiral, it's kind of decent against Altergeist and Trickstars, but I thought Gokis and Spirals were like better decks than the others just because their ceilings is so much higher, especially Goki, to where the ceiling is higher and it's more consistent. But that was definitely something I would change going forward. So Cherries is probably a better side deck card than a main deck card in my opinion right now, and that was something that I definitely did incorrectly. However, I did want to have enough defense to play, and so I wanted at least 9 to 10 hand traps. And so looking back, I would maybe play different hand traps, and I'm not sure what. I guess maybe Gamma. Gamma has the problem of playing Driver, which is an engine requirement, which you never want, but especially not in a deck like this to where it is so finicky, where consistency is an issue. However, it might be best moving forward because you do need the defense, and Cherry just isn't the best main deck option, I guess. And so again, that's just another thing to consider. Valor I felt was pretty good as well. The only time Valor's bad is if you're playing against Spiral and they have Resort, or against Trickstar where they obviously just generally have the Lycanus or they have extra light stages, and you know, you just negated a Candina for nothing. Like, you just discard a card for nothing when you try to Valor Candina. And so that always is really bad. So even in that matchup, I try to hold it for maybe like a Knightmare or something, or whatever they summon with like their scapegoat tokens. But generally Valor is really bad in that matchup as well. Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion was something that I think is actually really strong, and I think it's very underrated too, and I think that a lot of people don't really know about it, but you can use it to negate Helix, so it's good against Spiral. You're also negating the missions. There's a lot of things you can negate actually, like negate a quick fix, or you know, anything, or actually don't negate quick fix, but you can negate Helix, you can negate the Spiral mission effects, so it's pretty good. Against Goki, you can negate Goki Rematch, you can negate Soul Charge, Monster Reborn, things like that, but mainly Rematch. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that with spell cards, it negates the activation, which is different than Ash. And so if you negate a Goki Rematch, they can search another one and then play it. So you just have to be careful in that matchup, what you're going to negate with Ghost Bell, because that's something that got me in one round, to where my opponent played a Goki Rematch and negated it with Ghost Bell, and then I didn't notice this beforehand, but it negates the activation, so he played another copy of it, and then Soul Charged. So, Ghost Bell is good, but you have to be wary of what it does, I think. It's also pretty good against Altergeist sometimes, because you can stop the whole manifestation loop. And then against Trickstar, sometimes if they use Reincarnation in the graveyard, it can be good in that way. But it's being sided out against Trickstars for the most part, because I don't think it's very good in that matchup generally. It just has that one interaction. And then finally, DD Crow. I liked Crow because, one, it's searchable, and that comes up a lot. But again, it's also good against Spiral, it's good against Goki. It's not so good against Trickstars like the other ones, obviously, but it's very similar to Ghost Bell, to where like you're stopping the manifestation loop in Altergeist. So I felt that Ash was like generally like the best one by far, and this was a good opportunity for me to see how good the other ones were, and they were all, again, very niche but playable. And so I'll see how I change this moving forward. I think I will definitely play Infinite Impertinence moving forward. But, I mean, I don't have access to the card because it's expensive, but maybe in the future I will get some, but I do think it's really good, and I would probably play it over Valor, for sure, because it's just a better version of Valor. I mean, it's like Valor and more. Now, Valor has its merits, but I think the other card is just a lot better. I'm going to think about what to do with the Chariots again. I think Gamma's maybe an option, and I do really like these, actually, because it gives me 4 cards to negate Helix, so that's nice. This is also good against Goki. I don't know if I mentioned that. Negate is sold. And the final monster I play is one Knightmare Corruptor Ibli. Of course. For the spells, we're going to start with 3 Terraformings and 1 Spiral Resort. Resort is easily the best card in your deck. It searches all of your cards in your deck, and it's what makes this matchup so good against most other decks. So like, when you're playing against the mirror match, it's really good because your opponent can target your cards with the Nightmares, the Sleepers, etc. When you're playing against Altergeist, it really stops Siliquidus, or Soliloquy, whatever it's called. It stops that card because they have to bounce Resort first, which obviously just gives you another search. And so it's really good against that matchup as well. It's good against really anything, and if it stays on the board for more than a couple turns, generally you're able to gain enough advantage to win because you're searching Toughs, Agents, getting so much value out of it that it's just insanely powerful. So one card that I've seen a lot of discussion about lately is Pseudofield, or Pseudospace. And pseudospace is really good because a problem in this deck is what happens when your resort is destroyed, because there isn't very many ways of getting it back. And like I said before, it's such a powerful card, you always want access to it, but it's hard once it gets destroyed. And so pseudospace is a way to sort of get that effect again. And it also sort of fixes the problem of drawing multiples of these, because this is essentially 4 cards that do the same thing that you don't want in multiples. And so pseudospace kind of fixes that as well. And now the problem with pseudospace though is that it's a brick, because if you don't have access to resort, it literally doesn't do anything, which is a problem in a deck that has so many other cards like that, such as your last resort, which can be a brick, your sleeper can be a brick, master plan's a brick, the rescues can be bricks. And so you really don't want to play that many bricks, and so pseudospace sort of contributes to that. However, again, it does fix that problem of having your resort destroyed. And so I've seen it go both ways. I've seen players be successful with it, I've seen people be successful without it. I'm not a fan of it because of the consistency. However, I think there's definitely an argument for it. And so even though it's a brick, you're only going to draw it in about 12 to 13% of your games going first, which isn't very much at all. And so I think an argument can really be made for that. And so I will leave that up to you. Maybe I'll put a poll in the top right corner of the screen. What do you guys think about pseudospace? Next we have 3 Foolish Burial Goods. Definitely the best extender of the deck. It allows you to send like assault or rescue, so it can either be monster reborn or double summon, and both of those cards are really good, and having it in one is actually just insane. And so you definitely need 3 Foolish Burial Goods in any Spiral deck. Next we have 2 Twin Twisters, because once again this was a going second Spiral deck, and so this was actually relatively weak against Spirals and Goki, but it was good against Altergeist and Trickstars. And so at first I wasn't playing this at all, but I felt that I needed something else for Altergeist. Because if you don't have Resort, Altergeist matchup can actually be pretty difficult with all of their back row. But again, Resort fixes that problem, but if you don't have Resort, you need this. And even against them, if you have Twin Twisters, generally it's an auto win because you can simplify the game state to a point to where Tough and Agent can just beat them down. And so I really like Twin Twister in that matchup and against Trickstars. However, again, it's sort of a paradox within the format to where you can build for the combo decks like Goki and Spiral, but those cards are actually really bad against the other cards, such as or the other decks I should say, such as Altergeist and Trickstar. And so I tried to include cards for both, but it sort of just depends on your study or deck building philosophy. I don't think it's very good to hedge in both directions, and that was sort of my mistake with this deck, I think. So I like Twin Twister a lot, but I think maybe moving forward I could change that for something else. I think moving forward in the Spiral, or not Spiral format, but Brandish format or Sky Striker format, these are going to be a lot better because you can punish players for using multi-roll, and you're also going to be able to deal with Widow Anchors. And so I think this will be big then, but as of right now, it was okay. And then for the 1-of spells, 1 Foolish Burial, 1 Reinforcements of the Army, 1 1-for-1, 1 Big Red, and 1 Assault. This is mostly pretty standard. I think the only thing that's maybe not standard is 1 Big Red, where I've seen some decks play 2, I've seen some play 1. The only reason I chose 1 over 2 is because I don't necessarily want to draw it in the early game, because it can potentially be a brick. I wanted to maximize consistency, and I felt that Big Red was one of those cards where it's like, it's good, don't get me wrong, but like, you have to be able to play for it to be good. And sometimes you're just not able to play. And so I didn't want to draw a card where, you know, it's only good after I've played. And so 1 Big Red is fine. The second one came up maybe once or twice, but it's not necessary. You just have to play around it. So you're not going to like blow your first Big Red knowing you don't have that second one. So you have to be a little more conservative with it, be a little bit safer, and do it when you know you have game or when you're going to set up an unbreakable board. And then for the traps, just 2 rescue and 3 evenly matched. Again, standard for any going second Spiral deck. The only thing that, again, is maybe not standard is I've seen some people play 3 versus 2. Again, I wanted to optimize for consistency, so I didn't want to play too many rescues because it's not the best card to draw in most cases. And while the Knightmares fix it, while you have Twin Twisters fixes it, while you have all these other cards to fix it, that doesn't mean you're always going to have them. And there are going to be those games where you draw it, where you draw multiples, and I wanted to reduce those number of games. And so that's why I went with 2, and while, again, it lowered my ceiling, it increased the consistency a little bit. And so I feel that this is still pretty good. Like, sure, I can't do the whole like extra link wombo combo thing. Like, I can still do some crazy combos, but you don't need to do the full ones, I don't think, to win. And so I felt that 2 is probably the best. Alright, so if we look at this deck on a macro sense, just looking at the non-engine cards, and I like doing this just to sort of template what kind of deck you have, just to give some sort of like, again, a template really. But for this type of deck, a going second combo deck, we have 10 defensive cards, all hand traps for helping us go second. Then we have 5 breaker cards, again, to help us go second. So when our opponent makes a board, we stop it. These are stopping them from making it in the first place. And then once we stop it, we can play through their defense, with the extenders, which we have 6 of, or even if we don't have either of these can help us play through boards. So if like we're playing against Altergeist, they have their standard board, they have Silk, Protocol, let's say, having an extender is going to help us play through both of that, because one of their outs is going to stop our engine. So like we might summon a Tough, that's going to get stopped, but then the extender helps us play past that. And so we could have either like ashed them or done something to stop them from getting to that point. We could have one of these to break the board that they set up, or we could have one of these to play through it. And so we have really 3 different ways to play going second. Now these also help us going first, where none of these help us do that. So that's sort of how, you know, it's a going second deck. This is one of the ways how you can sort of tell if you're playing like a going first deck or going second deck, to where like a going first deck might like, instead of having so many hand traps as defense, you might have actual trap cards as defense, like an Altergeist deck would. And so the card rules really tell you a lot about how the deck actually plays. And then again, to add on to the going second type of theme, again we have the Toughs and the Agents and things like that. So oh, and Assault, that's really good going second. And the only other thing that we have is the one engine requirement, and that is the Ibli. And so Ibli is just necessary to get more out of your combos. You need it to use Mermaid effectively. You need this also for some of your big combos. There's also a play where you firewall this back to your hand, summon it, and then like summon back a Link monster, so that's pretty good. So it's an engine requirement, it's a brick, but it does have its place, which is why we play it. For the extra deck, we have 2 double helixes. This is your main guy. It gets to all of your spiral cards. You have to play 2. At least 2. I've seen some decks play 3, but I find 2 to be just fine. Like, I've never necessarily needed the 3rd one, and only playing 2 gives you space for other cards, and so I like 2 a lot. One Knightmare Unicorn, and again, this is one of my favorite ones because it allows you to shuffle back Resort so that you can resolve Master Plan again. And now it's also good for breaking your opponent's boards, or sometimes you'll shuffle back like any sort of brick, and then it'll help you play later on in the game. It's just a really versatile card, and so it's I really like it a lot. It's definitely one of the main cards that made this deck better. Next we have one Trigate Wizard. Trigate Wizard is what most people think about when going first. They think about having the negation, but one of the things that came up more for me as a going second deck was actually the banishing effect and the damage thing. And so going second, you would make this, you banish one of your opponent's cards, then you have Tough Agent destroying cards, you got the Knightmares destroying cards. So it's like you can clear your opponent's board so easily in this deck that you can go for game, and Trigate is one of the reasons you can do that. Now of course the negation effect is also really good, but the banishing effect came up actually more, for me, at least this weekend. Next we have Knightmare Phoenix. This is for destroying back row. It protects your co-linked monsters from being destroyed by battle. Very useful effect. Next we have Knightmare Goblin. This gives you an extra normal summon, and this is really good because a lot of times in your main combos you'll extra normal summon the quick fix, and then that'll just like get all of your plays going from there. And so another issue in like old Spiral decks was that once you started your combo without quick fix, your combo generally didn't have access to quick fix, because like say you started with Drone Agent, you're summoning Master Plan, and then even if you search quick fix within the combo, like let's say Master Plan or Resort, you still can't summon it again because you normal summon the drone and you don't have access to Assault through the combo. And so in previous combos it was really difficult to use Master Plan and quick fix, but now in the combos, because you have Goblin and you get that additional normal summon, you can still use both of them in your combos, allowing you to get to a lot more of your resources. So Goblin's actually really important, while also protecting your co-linked monsters from targeting. Very big. Next we have Cerberus, just like Phoenix, but it hits monsters in the main monster zone, so that's pretty good. And then finally for the Knightmares we have Mermaid, which summons Ibli from the deck, and Mermaid really helps you with your triple link and your extra link when you go for that play. And so it's just important that it points down. It also helps sometimes too that you're summoning Ibli from the deck, because Ibli too, like if you use it in combination with Goblin, getting that extra normal summon on Ibli can summon back something like a Firewall or a Trigate or a Unicorn or whatever to really extend your plays and give you a lot of link material. And so sometimes what you can do is you might have like a Unicorn, which is 3 link material, and then you turn that into a Mermaid, which gets Ibli, so that you're turning a 3 link material into 2 link materials. But then when you normal summon back the Ibli, you're like summoning back a Unicorn, for example, and so now you have 3 more link materials. So you went from 3 to having like Mermaid, and then so you end up with like you start with 3 and you end up with 3 plus Mermaid and Ibli, so you end up with more. And so yeah, it's really good. It's really useful. Like playing Ibli really is worth it. I feel like I didn't explain that very well, but like Ibli and Mermaid are really good. It's also important for when your opponent gives you Ibli, you're not locked out of your game, and so being able to like summon opponent's Iblis into your own Mermaids also helps a lot. And so something that'll come up a lot is it'll give you Ibly, and then you'll make Mermaid, and then you'll just summon Helix under it, and because Helix points left, you can still do your plays. And so that comes up a lot. And then the final, or not the final card, but like the next card I want to talk about is Lyrilusk Recital Starling. And this card is really good because you can search DD Crow, and so it's one of your searchable forms of defense, which is really, really powerful because defense is good, and we play a lot of defense, but if you can't get to it, it's worthless. And this is one of your ways to guarantee that you have it. And now another thing that makes this really good is that it can boost your cards by 600, allowing you to go for game easier, or one of the bigger things is it helps you get over Ultimate Falcon. And so this deck destroys a lot of back row through like your Tufts, your Agents, your Phoenix, your Trigates. Like, you destroy a lot of back row. And if you hit Awaken the Dragons, it can be very intimidating at first, but you have outs to it. You just have to be kind of crafty, and Lyrilusk is one of the ways to help you do that. And so another thing that's good about it is that being able to search the monster, which Princess Sprout can't do, if you're doing a Firewall combo, you can actually summon that monster and then link with it. So it can also give you extra link materials, whereas Princess Sprout usually will not. So that's why I chose this over Princess Sprout. Also, because if you're doing your Wombo combo, Princess Sprout's going to add you a spell or trap, but none of your spells or traps do anything more when you're Wombo comboing. Like, once you get to that point, you have everything you need, your opponent has nothing, and you win. You don't need Princess Sprout in that case. And so this is it for the main extra deck monsters that I used. These came up in almost every single game that I was winning. So like if I were to win a game, these are the ones that I was probably summoning. The other ones were good, and we'll get to them, but they weren't as frequent. And so to start those off, we're going to have Firewall Dragon. And so as I mentioned before, Firewall Dragon is really good for bouncing back your cards and reusing them. It can also be used defensively, but just in general, it's a very, I don't want to say a niche card, but it doesn't come up in all of your matches. And not even close either. Like, you really don't, I don't want to say you don't need it, but it doesn't come up very much. Next we have Decode Talker. Decode Talker comes up a little bit more than Firewall, especially, like I said before, this is one of your ways of outing Ultimate Falcon because it can boost attack. And so one thing that you can do is when you summon Ibly to your opponent's side of the field, summon it in front of their extra monster zone, so that Decode will point to it. Then you summon two things that Decode is pointing to, and Decode will be gaining 500 for each, so it'll gain 1500, putting it at 38, allowing it to attack over an Ultimate Falcon. If you have that and a Lyrilusk, you can boost it up to even higher, and so you can get a really big Decode Talker sometimes, so that lets you attack over stuff. So that's really good. Decode's also good because the links are very convenient, especially when you're using Goblin. And so sometimes when you're using Goblin, like you have to extra summon to the zones it points to. So you have to summon Goblin in the main monster zone. So you need something that points down or down diagonal for it. And generally you're going to be using Mermaid, Decode Talker, or Knghtmare. And so Decode and Knghtmare are both very good for that. Knghtmare is also good because there are plays with Quick Fix where it comes up sometimes. And so you have to play it for that. But it's also a good Cherries target against Altergeist. Because if you Cherries Altergeist for this, sometimes what they'll do is they'll summon Miluseek, you Cherries for Knghtmare, and now they don't get that search. And sometimes that's the difference between them having Multi-Faker or not having Multi-Faker. And so Knghtmare, I think, was a good Cherries target because it was something that is good within Spirals. Like, you summon it sometimes, but it's also good with Cherries. And so I felt that it was just a good addition. Next, Borload Dragon. Borload Dragon I never summoned, but you have to play it. Like, there was one game actually where the guy could have Borloaded me, and he's like, well, I could have Borloaded you that game, but then I just would have lost to your Borload. And I was like, oh, good thing I play Borload. But if I wasn't, like, you know, it's just that good of a card. It's one of those cards you have to take into account and assume that everyone's playing because it's just so good. Next we have Knightmare Griffin. And a funny story about this card actually. So I actually messed up the effect because this is a foreign card. Shoutouts to Sean. But I made a mistake with the effect, and the opponent asked me to like read my own card, and I couldn't. So that was interesting. I'm not terrible at German. I know like some German, but like, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh German's crazy. So yeah. Griffin's a good card though. It's one of the ways that you can get Resort back from the graveyard once it gets destroyed, so it's useful for that. It's also an easy way to get your things co-linked, and so it's useful. Sometimes you need it for going for game, especially when you get cherried for Helix and you still have the Wombo combo. Then sometimes you're just going to end up with a bunch of links, and it's one of your bigger link monsters. And so it can be useful for that too. But also the effect negation can be difficult. But just remember, it's not good against wombo combo decks. It's only good against slower decks. And then the final card that I played was Isolde, Two Tails of the Noble Knights. And this was at first a cherries target, but it actually comes up sometimes when you get cherried, because you can make this with like Toughen Agent and then search another tougher agent for next turn. So that's actually really useful, to where if you get cherried otherwise, you really don't have like a follow-up. So if you get cherried, sometimes with Tough Agent, then you just have Tough Agent, which is not bad, but it means if your Tough gets destroyed, or mostly your Tough, but if your Tough gets destroyed, you don't have anything on your next turn. But this, and you also have to assume your opponent can get over a Tough. But with Isolde, with this, you just search another Tough, and again you have the same assumption that they're going to be able to play, and then break your board, but then you have that follow-up. And so that's where I really liked Isolde, Two Tails of the Noble Knights. And it only came up like once or twice, but it did in fact come up. And so I actually like this a lot. But again, it's better to cherry this against Goki, and then they kind of can't play after that. Alright, so for the side deck, I sided some cherries targets. I sided Electromite, Phantom Quartz, and Hestia. These were actually like terrible. I couldn't think of other cards to the side that I like had and were useful. So I just put these in, you know, just in case I played against a Pendulum player who still thought they were good. I heard a lot of people talking about that Dark Doriado Team Samurai deck, and I did not want to lose to, like, you know, them just drawing stupid and doing that whole 6 negate thing. I don't think that's like a very viable deck. I think it's super inconsistent. I don't see it actually working out, but I didn't want to lose to it. So, you know, this was fine. Phantom Quartz, because I thought Froggy might play Gem Knights, and I didn't want to lose to Froggy because every time I play Froggy, he plays something ridiculous and beats me. I was ready, even though we didn't play. And then one Hestia, just because sometimes I don't think cherries against Hestia is very good actually, but I do think that sometimes it's one of the only ways that they can out your boards. So like, if you summon a Borreload, sometimes it's really hard for them to get over, but they can just attack over it with like Hestia and then something else under the Hestia to gain more attack and like do some stuff. Or like Hestia just does so much for that deck that in case I did keep cherries in, I could do this, or use it somehow, but it never came up. I didn't even side the Sand against Altergeist. Again, cherries against that deck's just not good in general. Like, this was not a good idea. So if any of you were thinking about doing that, don't do that. Alright, so now for the real side deck, it was 2 Kaijus, 3 Called by the Graves, 1 Twin Twisters, Monster Reborn, Spiral Gear Fully Armed, Spiral Gear Utility Wire, and triple red Reboot. And so I actually kind of like this lineup a lot, especially against slower decks like Altergeist and Trickstars. I really like the red Reboots and the Twin Twisters, and also the Called by the Graves if I was going first. Utility Wire was also really good going first, and so I like those a lot. Monster Reborn was the only card that I felt was sort of like an odd choice, and I only put that there because at the last minute it was in the main deck. I added it to the side deck, just move some cards around. So that never went in really. Fully Armed was there mostly for if I went second against any sort of rogue deck that I didn't have anything else for. I like that it was like a searchable card to get me over other stuff, banish other things. It's non-targeting removal, so non-targeting banishing removal too, so it's really useful sometimes. So I wasn't sure, like, this just for like, you know, start of a new format. You never know what you're going to play against sometimes. This could be like the card that's good. And so I sided it for that. Kaiju's for going second against against Spirals or Knightmare or Gokis or any Knightmare deck or any of that combo stuff. Again, Called by the Grave for if I thought I was going to get hand trapped to death. And so that's mostly the side deck. Again, I felt really comfortable with this. And in fact, just like these cards actually, like these are the main cards that I felt were really, really good. And so if I was playing against Altergeist, for example, I would side in the triple red Reboot and the Twin Twister, and that was really strong. Or the same against Trickstars. If I was playing against a combo deck, I would side in the Called by the Graves and the Kaijus. So like these if I'm going first, these if I'm going second. And again, this is a going second deck, so with the Kaijus, I would also still have the Twin Twisters, the Evenlies, or outside of the Twin Twisters for these actually, but I still have the Evenlies and the hand traps and stuff. So just these cards really, I was really comfortable with. Like again, these for slower decks, these for faster decks, mostly this, and this for hand traps. And so yeah, that's the deck for the most part. Alright guys, this has been my Knightmare Spiral deck profile. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave them in the comment section below. I hope I explained everything well. I know I probably could have done this a lot better. Just really tired from traveling from Virginia to Connecticut. You know, just really super tired, but I hope I explained everything well enough. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and if you did, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. But as always guys, I'll see you in the next one.